All right, we're back here with another episode of the Nailing History podcast. I'm Matt here with John.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Due to popular demand, we're here with another special edition with our resident O.J. Simpson expert, Emily M.
Hi, thanks for having me back, guys.
Emily had a dance recital today. She danced to a hip-hop song. Let's give her a round of applause.
Very cool.
I did. I was like little
felt-
Sidney Simpson on stage. Luckily, my dad did not show up and stare down my mom in the middle of the dance recital.
I felt like you in the Italian consulate, John. There was no air conditioning in this place. I was stuck on the balcony. And also, as an engineer looking at the quality of the concrete of these columns coming up this old church, I was pretty terrified that the whole balcony was going to collapse. It was an intensive experience for me.
There was no air conditioning for the dancers either. It was in long sleeves and long pants. It was rough.
Shout out Bryn Mawr College for no air conditioning in the church. The consolidation of the concrete was pitiful.
I saw what Sydney Brown was wearing, so I was watching some documentaries trying to do some prep for this show and actually saw the outfits and costumes. It's a pretty elaborate dance they had. Was that kind of what you had to show up with?
Full-on costume.
Tell her about your shoes.
So I was doing hip-hop, so we were allowed to wear sneakers, but they had to be white. And Matthew is in some sort of algorithm where he gets shown cool shoes all the time or something. So he advised me to get some white Nike Air Force Ones.
She had a dance recital a couple months ago, and she was wearing mom shoes, doing hip-hop in mom shoes. And I said, you can't do that.
No, they were Adidas.
They were Adidas, like, cross trainers. Ridiculous. Okay, let's change subject here. I wanted to bring something up that's a little related to this O.J. Simpson story. John, have you heard this trend that was going on TikTok? A bunch of women were asked if they were lost in the woods, would they rather run into another man or a grizzly bear? So what would your answer be, John?
Well, as a 6'7" man myself, I would say another man. Take my chances. Now, if it was a Comanche, I might have problems, but I would still probably choose a man. Probably have a better chance.
I think the overwhelming answer of women was they would rather run into a bear, which I guess is a commentary. This is just kind of tying into OJ or whoever committed this murder. I think the overall consensus, it was a man. If it was OJ or not, I mean, who's really to say at this point? But it's like definitely a commentary on that. But just logistically thinking about it in terms of which would you have a better chance of surviving? I would say you have probably, conservatively speaking, a 90% chance that the man you run into in the woods isn't going to murder you.
What about assault you in a different way? It'd be traumatic.
Oh, I think that's probably the same. But then with a grizzly bear, you probably have like a 40% chance of surviving that, conservatively speaking. But if it's a female bear and you get between her and her cubs, you have like a 1% chance of surviving that. I think just as far as like logically thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about the predictability between a bear and a man, too. Like, you can kind of predict the behavior of a bear.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
And a bear would be acting out of nature. I would say instinct. I don't think the man would be acting out of instinct, murdering a woman. It would be a little unsettling. How do you really know what kind of man it is? And how do you gain that kind of trust in that situation where it might be something you need to determine within a few minutes?
I think the more straightforward question would be, would you rather run into a man in a back alley or a bear in the woods?
Okay.
That would be a little bit of a better question for me.
I'd still say bear in the woods.
I mean, I would probably get down for that. My thought also is if you were lost in the woods, I feel like your first would be, wow, somebody else is here. They can hopefully get me out of here. If you say a man in a dark back alley by yourself, that makes a little bit more sense.
I think it's just a commentary on women having to be aware of their surroundings all of the time. It can be scary to be in a parking garage by yourself or walking down a street at night. And it doesn't mean that every single man that's out there is going to hurt you, but we have to be aware of that possibility literally all of the time that we're out by ourselves.
I think it's an interesting question. If I ran into recently Daniele Cavalente in the woods, yeah, I'd be pretty concerned.
Maybe as men, you take this for granted how strong you are, but most women are not going to be able to overpower a man even if it's a very strong woman.
Those people in the woods.
Also, thinking about the history in the early founding of the country, the people that went west initially were almost predominantly all male, and they had to fight the wilds. They had to fight the bears. They had to be super resilient. So my question is, when did the breakdown happen over 150 years of that women's first thought is that this man's threatening opposed to this man could be resilient and this person could actually help me?
I don't want to oversimplify it, but I think you got to blame it on OJ.
Could be.
Men like OJ. Look how he came off to everyone as this really nice guy, and look what he was doing to his wife behind the scenes. It just makes you realize it doesn't matter how someone presents themselves. You really don't know what they're capable of doing.
So we would rather take a bear that they know what they're going to do.
It would be more predictable. At least I could play dead, and the bear might leave me alone. And psychologically, if it's a bear, they don't know better. But a man would know better and still make the decision to harm the woman. If I died and my family had to be told, I'd rather them be told a bear got her than a man murdered.
That's enough of that talk. So anyway, we'll just start off. If we've got any feedback from any listeners, we got a bunch of new listeners. We had a whirlwind of a week, just record-setting pace on downloads. So, hey, if you're a new listener, if you want to learn about some colonial America, we talk about Mussolini being killed. We talk about the mutiny on the Bounty, all this very interesting history stuff. Just go back to episode 1, start from scratch, and get into the universe that John and I have created, the Nailing History universe. And drop us a like and comment and subscribe.
We're here to entertain, but also hopefully educate a little bit. That's our end goal.
Any of those new fans, give us a shout out. Give us positive feedback. That's great. Negative feedback is great content. We'll bring it up on the show. So any kind of feedback, that would be awesome. And, like, share, and subscribe.
And there's even a possibility if you really have something you want to get out, either criticism or an accolade, or just say something to us, you could probably end up on the show. We could probably find a way to get you on here.
Have we hit all 7 continents? I think we have. Not Antarctica. I think everyone but Antarctica.
Maybe not the polar bears. Maybe the polar bear that's not busy on TikTok. You didn't see that one.
I had one comment. I just want to bring this up before we get into it here. We're here to continue the O.J. Simpson saga. There's just been something that's been bothering me a little bit, and it's about the Cabo trip. So there's 2 things that came to my attention. First is a comment on Emily. When we were talking about what a frogman was, we were explaining that it wasn't a man who's also a frog. Emily, your defense was, I thought it was like a Marvel hero where a person was a frog and a man. That was a superpower. You said, wouldn't it be cool to have a superpower where you could be on land and in water? But then my thought was, that's like every human being who knows how to swim. So that's not a great superpower. You could argue that humans are amphibious in general. So that would be a super lame superpower. Although Aquaman, maybe if you could swim underwater, maybe. So then also, I want to speculate a little bit more about the big fight that OJ and Nicole had on that. And I'm hoping that this occurred. OJ comes up to her and she's like, hey, Nicole, you know how your biggest fear is frogs? Well, guess what? I'm going to be a frogman on the show. There's nothing you can do about it, right? Doesn't that freak you out? I hope that Nicole said back to him, well, OJ, your biggest fear is drowning and you're going to be a Navy SEAL, you dope. And maybe that's what really set it off.
I think we were missing part of that story.
I just hope that Nicole said that back to him.
That's a good point. How was he playing that role?
It would be really funny if he was a Navy SEAL that was scared of drowning. That would be a funny part of the show if that was his character. I don't know if you'd make it through basic training.
Maybe that was his way of conquering his fear. Maybe they were like having that conversation. What's your greatest fear? He mentioned swimming. They maybe laughed at him, and then she made that comment. And then next thing you know, he's like, you know what? I'm going to conquer that fear through filming this show.
Maybe that's what happened in Cabo. Purely speculation. You heard it here first on Nailing History. John, do you have anything to bring up?
No, I just heard a little more news that Ron Goldman apparently wanted to start a restaurant, but he also wanted to be a model.
Remember when Prince was just a symbol? That's how the restaurant was going to be. It wasn't going to have a name. It was just going to be a symbol.
He could pull it off.
A softball.
That's what I was thinking.
There's another thing that John and I were talking about, Emily. I still don't understand Rob Kardashian telling somebody that Marcus Allen may have been at Nicole Brown's house, and that's what got her murdered.
He thought it could be a motive.
John had a theory. Do you think OJ told him that, and then Rob just blurted it out.
So Rob Kardashian was not active with his law license prior to the murders, and he reactivated his law license so that he could be part of OJ's counsel, and people thought he did that so that he would not have to testify against OJ.
Yeah,
it gave
right.
him
That's what I'm
immunity.
saying.
So I don't think he said it as a definite, but was it a definite? And he just can't say it because it was a client attorney privilege. Him and OJ ended up not being friends after the trial.
Apparently, he did his laundry too for him. Did you hear about this Louis Vuitton?
Rob Kardashian was carrying the Louis Vuitton bag, and people think that's where the murder clothes were, I think.
Yeah. Apparently, this Rob Kardashian guy seemed like a real piece of work.
Sweet hair, too.
A white streak.
Yeah. I had one little feedback note that I wanted to bring up from a friend. Texted me, and she commented about the Tillamook, which led us into a conversation at our surprise that someone could not like Tillamook ice cream.
Interesting.
I think I need a little bit more information about it being too creamy.
I did a search, one of those like top 10s, and it was number 1 for being the most creamy ice cream you can find. But I guess that's a little upsetting if you're not used to that richness.
I also want to say the base of Moose Tracks is vanilla. I did look it up.
Thank you. What do you think OJ's favorite ice cream is?
Well, I don't think it's anything now because he's passed on.
What was his favorite? If you had a guess, knowing what you know, Emily, about this guy, about what you've read.
I bet he was someone who always got a milkshake. He wouldn't just eat ice cream.
Uh-huh.
It had to be a milkshake.
Like there's a group of 6 people and everyone's getting ice cream. Like, oh, what do you want, OJ? He's like, oh, I'll get a milkshake.
Yeah.
You got to be the difficult one.
Yeah, and then everyone
Yeah.
has to wait for them to make the milkshake.
That's how you were growing up. That's funny.
Sometimes.
He would be the one to be like, do you make your milkshakes with whole milk? Yeah. All right, I'll have one of those. And if they said no, then he'd throw a hissy fit.
And then Kato would come up from behind and ask you for oat milk. I'm on a diet, bro.
I'm dairy-free, gluten-free, vegan.
I don't want a tummy ache. I'm Kato.
Well, I actually have a great segue with ice cream.
Let's get into it. So this is going to be considered the continuation of the O.J. Simpson saga. We're picking up after the murders. Is that the timeline we're starting?
Yep, the day after the murders.
So June 13th, 1994.
That is correct. So where we left, OJ's plane was taking off from LAX. Nicole and Ron's bodies were just discovered by the neighbors, thanks to Kato the dog. The police were called while Kato Kaelin the human restlessly slept in his guest house, remaining unaware of what had just happened. So 12:30 a.m., the first officer on the scene reported a cardboard cup of ice cream sitting on the banister. And guess what kind of ice cream it was?
Tillamook?
No, it was Baskin Robbins. Guess what flavor?
31 options.
Hold on. I got to look up the options.
My guess is I'm going to go with
All right.
my least favorite as a kid. Butter pecan.
I'm going to guess it's Rocky Road. Rocky Road. It's definitely
You're both
Rocky Road.
wrong. Now, John, if you recall, we talked about the telepathy between pregnant moms,
Okay.
and it was indeed chocolate chip cookie dough.
Whoa.
Your same favorite flavor. Isn't that spooky?
But I don't have telepathy. I don't have telepathy.
But your mom did, and then you were born from your mom, and then now you
Yeah,
guys
'cause
have
your
the
mom-
connection.
She didn't let us buy that growing up, which is why I like it. It's forbidden fruit.
Nicole must have shared the same favorite flavor as you. So they find the ice cream. They think it's about 2 hours after the murders occurred. There were also candles burning in her bathroom, a filled bathtub, suggesting she had planned a candlelit bath before her death.
Oh, I thought the candles were because she was keeping her overhead down. Ridiculous statement.
Those Yankee candles can be expensive too, so they can run up.
She was probably stressing out after the whole thing. She had a day. Not as bad of a day as OJ did, but
Well, OJ's days are about to get a little bit worse over the next few days, unfortunately for OJ.
okay. So there's ice cream. It was candles. The kids were sleeping in bed.
Good.
The officer is careful not to disturb any evidence, preserving the crime scene for the investigators to show up. He calls up his
I think
supervisor.
they blew out the candles.
Probably not, because they had to take pictures. They were mad that he didn't take the temperature of the bath to see if it helped time the murders. The defense was mad about that, but he said his job is not to touch anything. He calls his supervisor. A steady stream of officers begin showing up. They put up the yellow crime tape. It's dark, so people don't really know that it's going on yet. Detective Ron Phillips, the supervising detective, calls the detective on call, Mike Furman, and his partner, Brad Roberts. Detectives Furman and Roberts arrive at the Bundy Drive location around 2:10 in the morning. Furman was a 42-year-old United States military veteran with 19 years on the LAPD force. And he had a notable history with OJ already before he showed up. So sometime when OJ and Nicole were married, Furman had responded to a distress call where he found Nicole Brown hiding in her car while OJ attempted to break the windshield with a baseball bat. Furman asked Simpson twice to put the bat down, and when OJ refused, Furman threatened him with his baton. OJ then complied and apologized. Furman offered Brown the chance to press charges, but she declined. Furman left, cautioning her with the words, "It's your life."
You think like if you're an LAPD officer, you get assigned the Brentwood section, you got it on Easy Street.
Especially after Rodney King. I actually heard a little more of that Furman. Apparently he had a bit of a whoops.
Yeah, he ended up being a really big part of the trial. So I am putting some information about him in here. Specifically, the information I'm bringing up becomes important later in the trial. I don't know how much we'll get into it, but
He's a doofus.
So he shows up. Around that time, the higher ups in the LAPD decided that they wanted to inform OJ in person of the murders rather than risk what they called a Belushi situation, because John Belushi had died at the Chateau Marmont Hotel, and the media found out before his family was notified. So Phillips, given the task, was anxious to carry out this order, but it was a couple hours before detectives Philip Van Adder and Tom Lang arrived. Van Adder was described as a beefy, slow-moving cop with a head of caramel-colored hair. What's the description I can find for him?
Beefy, like good looking.
I think beefy, like big.
Portly. He's not much of a beefcake. He's got a nice head of hair for how old he is.
Is it caramel colored?
I mean, he's got some grays. Anyway, keep going.
Tom Lang was a highly decorated detective involved in over 250 murder investigations. So they're highly experienced people coming onto the scene. So then Furman, Phillips, Van Adder, and Lang, they're all detectives. They decide to leave Bundy Drive around 5 a.m. to get to OJ's house because they want to personally inform him of the murders. So they get there. No one was home or answering the intercom. So they call the security company, and they were unaware of any vacation plans and had no forwarding numbers for him. So then they happened to notice the Bronco was parked on the street at a strange angle, as if it had been parked in a rush. So they go over to the Bronco, and they see a spot on it that they suspected to be a blood stain, and then more blood leading towards the house. So at this point, they're thinking there might be a crazy fan killing OJ and Nicole because they're connected. So they're not thinking that OJ would be responsible for anything. They're just like, we just came from a murder scene from his ex-wife. He could be in trouble. He's not answering the call. The security company isn't aware of any travel. You can see where their mindset was that this is a weird situation.
Someone's on the loose going after Nicole and him and anyone involved.
I don't buy it. That's a stupid way to think about it. Oh, wow. Nicole was murdered with a ton of blood, and we see blood. Oh, I guess somebody else came to the house.
Well,
But they don't think it was OJ that was at her house that murdered her at this point.
to Matt's point about it being stupid, about him thinking, well, OJ's in trouble, then maybe someone's going after him too. For them not to think it was OJ initially right off the bat.
Maybe not the major subject, but maybe be like, oh, yeah, this doesn't look good for OJ.
So they justify this as an emergency situation and that OJ and his loved ones might be in danger. So Van Adder allowed Mark Furman to jump the fence and open the gate, even without a warrant to enter the property.
Oh, wait, so they saw blood going into the gate?
Mm-hmm. The sidewalk. So they start searching the property, and they come upon the guest houses. They woke up Kato Kaelin first, asking him about his identity and activities the previous night. They inspected his shoes to see if there was a match to the shoe print at the murder scene. He was really tired. His eyes were red, and the police thought he was on drugs, but he was not.
I went to McDonald's.
I ran 10 miles. Basketball.
Sorry, I left the jacuzzi jets on. Oh, shoot.
So,
Am I in trouble? Was there an earthquake? Did I hallucinate a trip to McDonald's with OJ last night? He ate that Big Mac in like 3 seconds, dude.
And then he sees a Burger King Whopper wrapper. No, what happened?
Say that he sees a Burger King wrapper. And
Yeah, he hallucinated with McDonald's, but in actual fact, he was at Burger King, and he doesn't know what happened. He's all turned upside down.
They're interviewing Kato.
well, they saw this blood leading to the house. So they're like, who is this guy that's living in this guest house?
Yeah.
And so they check all of Kato's stuff. Nothing looks suspicious. And Kato's like, what is going on? And he thinks that OJ must have died in a plane crash. That's the first thought that he had. He thought the police, I guess, were coming to tell them that he had died in a plane crash.
Okay.
So after they tell Kato, they go next door where Arnell Simpson, OJ's oldest daughter, was staying in another guest house next to Kato. They wake up Arnell, and she is told about Nicole's murder, and she starts crying, and she's really upset. So then Arnell takes the police to the house using a key to open the front door. So now she's allowing them to go into the property. They checked for the live-in maid who wasn't there. They arranged for the children to be picked up by Arnell because they've now been at the police station for 5 hours at this point. And even Sydney had made a call home, and they heard it later on the answering machine where she said, "Mommy, please call me back. I want to know what happened last night. Why did we have to go to the police station? Please answer, Mommy. Please answer, Mommy. Please answer. Bye."
Oh, that's a gut punch.
Yeah, it's really sad. That would have been really freaky as a kid because I'm sure they didn't tell them anything. OJ's executive assistant of 20 years, Kathy Rhonda, and OJ's best friend, Al Cowlings, are both contacted by Arnell and informed about the murder. So at 6 a.m., this is all Pacific time because OJ's in Chicago, so just not to make it confusing. So 6 a.m. Pacific time, OJ's finally located and contacted. So now this is 8 hours after the murders, 7 hours after Kato last saw OJ leave for the airport, and 6 hours after his flight left. He gets called. And this is the conversation that they have with the LAPD and OJ about the murders. Okay. This is Detective Phillips from the LAPD. I have some bad news for you. Your ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, has been killed.
I know.
OJ says, "Oh my God, Nicole is killed. Oh my God, she is dead." And then the LAPD officer says, "Mr. Simpson, please try to get a hold of yourself. I have your children at the West LAPD. I need to talk to you about that." OJ says, "What do you mean you have my kids at the police station? Why are my kids at the police station?" And the detective says, "Because we have no place else to take them. They are there for safekeeping. I need to know what to do with your children." OJ says, "Well, I'm going to be leaving Chicago on the first available flight. I will come back to LA." So despite being notified of the murder, OJ did not ask how or where Nicole died, which Phillips found very unusual. He had made many a call informing family of deaths, and the fact that he asked for zero details about what happened was suspicious right off the bat.
I don't want to defend OJ, but why'd they yell at him? He's like, "Oh my God, my wife's dead." And then they're like, "Oh, OJ, calm down. You got your kids here. We got to figure out where to put your kids. Calm down."
Or police warm and fuzzy, generally.
When they make phone calls like, "We have to inform you that a loved one died," they say she was murdered, or they say just dead?
So he said he picked the words very carefully. He said, "Your ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, has been killed." So he didn't say murdered. She could have been killed in a car accident, but he didn't ask any details, right? So isn't that weird? Wouldn't your first question be like, "Oh my God, what happened? How did this happen?"
Trying to play devil's advocate, but yeah, you would probably be pretty upset and be like, "What the hell happened?
Yeah.
What do you mean she?"
At least where, when, how. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's never happened to me, so I don't know how I'd react.
It also sounds like he was focused on his kids, to be fair.
Do you think this whole time Kato's like sitting in the kitchen like, "Man, he must have been really pissed about those jacuzzi jets"? So OJ's flying back. The kids are coming back to the house.
Yeah. Nicole's parents are called. Denise Brown recalls her mother screaming when she received the news. Denise grabbed the phone and told the detective, "He did it. He finally did it," referring to OJ. So now the detectives are like, okay, OJ barely reacted to us telling him that she was killed, and her sister is like, OJ killed her, right? It's already like the evidence is mounting against him and kind of weird.
Oh, that's speculation.
No, it is, but that's a weird sequence of events to happen when someone's murdered. So Kato overheard the conversation of them telling Nicole's family, and he finally understands why the police are there and why he's being questioned. Kato's taken to the police station, and as he's leaving, they're telling him to watch out not to step on any blood droplets. So he's just like, what in the heck is going on here? This is crazy, because he didn't know that Nicole was murdered.
Is that the same blood that was in OJ's briefcase that I loaded up in that limo?
He wouldn't let me load up. So Arnell goes with Al Cowlings to get the children. Al Cowlings said in the car the kids weren't puzzled or asking questions. I don't know if they had chips or some cookies or whatever, but they, seemed to be normal. Detective Furman, continuing to search the grounds, finds a glove on the property, which looked like it matched the one at the crime scene. He brought all the other detectives over one by one to show them this glove laying in the spot that he found it, which ends up being important in the trial. Mm-hmm. Around 7 a.m., the criminologist Dennis Fung arrives, and he went to the Bronco and concluded that that red stain was likely blood. So then that's when Rockingham was declared a crime scene. And Detective Van Adder left for the West LA police station to get a search warrant. He gave Marsha Clark a call because they'd worked together before on a murder case using blood and other trace evidence. So Marsha Clark had joined the LA District Attorney's office in 1981 and quickly excelled in her various positions. Prior to the Simpson trial, Clark had spent 4 years in the Special Trials Unit, which handled the most complex and sensitive investigations. Hearing the details from Van Adder, Marcia was struck by how fancy the neighborhoods were where these events took place, but she had never heard of O.J. Simpson before.
Must not be a Lethal Weapon fan. Or, sorry,
Naked Gun.
Naked Gun fan.
It strikes me as odd that she had no idea who he was or watched commercials on TV.
I call BS on that one, Marcia. Sorry. It would probably be like, I don't know, who's Tom Brady?
Or who's Taylor Swift? But anyway, so Marcia agreed that there was more than enough evidence for a search warrant, and probably even enough to arrest OJ at that point. So hopping back to Chicago where OJ is, so he had landed at 3:30 a.m. and checked into his hotel by 4:15 a.m. At 6 a.m., he got the news, and he claims that he cut his hand on a glass in anguish when he received the news about Nicole.
Yeah, adds up.
He breaks a glass. And then he makes a bunch of calls, including to Kathy, his assistant, American Airlines, United Airlines, Hertz Rental Car. He also calls a criminal defense attorney, Harold Weitzman, to meet him upon his return home, which seemed strange for someone whose ex-wife had been killed, but he didn't know she was murdered yet. But he wanted a criminal defense attorney to meet him at his house.
I feel like if somebody said to me, like, hey, your wife's been killed, I would assume she was murdered. Not defending him, not asking another question.
I don't think the defense attorney thing is implying guilt. My wife is killed. On paper, it's like, I don't know, he's high profile.
Who did he call for a defense attorney?
Howard Weitzman. No one's saying he's a suspect. It just seems a little strange.
It's a pretty quick response.
Right.
They could have caught the person. They could have the guy in custody for all he knows.
Right. He has no idea. He didn't ask. So 20 minutes later, OJ calls back the LAPD. He let them know he's returning on the next flight to LA. 10 minutes later, he stormed into the hotel lobby, upset his car wasn't there yet, slammed his fist on the counter, which made his hand bleed, and he asked for a bandage. So his hand's definitely cut at this point. 6:35, OJ's car arrives. He took a 7:15 a.m. flight back to LA, only 3 hours after he had checked into the hotel. After he left, the Chicago detectives searched his hotel room. They found blood-stained sheets, broken glass, and torn pieces of paper with the name of a Hollywood talent agent. So there was broken glass there. That is what he said happened.
Who was the talent agent?
I don't know.
I feel like that's the missing piece to the whole puzzle.
So now we're back in LA. It's been 4.5 hours since they found the glove at Rockingham. The police finally obtain a warrant that they can do the search. They find more blood traces on the property, including inside of the Bronco. At around noon, OJ arrives back at Rockingham and was handcuffed in seclusion because he got the celebrity treatment where they try not to handcuff them, where people can take pictures. And then Howard Weitzman showed up and had the police immediately remove the handcuffs, which they did. So after the handcuffs were removed, OJ agreed without hesitation to go to the police station to talk to them about Nicole's death. So he goes to the police station and he's questioned by Van Adder and Lang. After speaking privately with his attorney, OJ declined having his attorney present, which was very unusual. Marcia Clark especially found this strange because Weitzman was a highly experienced criminal attorney. Weitzman did request the detectives tape record the conversation. During the interview conducted at Parker Center, OJ discussed his relationship with Nicole, mentioning their divorce 2 years prior and their attempts to reconcile. He described their joint custody arrangement and detailed his activities on June 12th, including attending his daughter Sydney's dance recital and returning home after. When asked about the cut on his hand, OJ explained he initially cut it in Chicago on broken glass and reopened the wound while rushing to pack for his trip. The detectives revealed they found blood in his car and home, to which he responded it might be from his injury. Right? So cut his hand in Chicago, but the blood that was already at the house was from the injury that he got in Chicago. Like, that doesn't make sense.
You know, people be bleeding.
The interview covered various other details, including the vehicles Simpson and Nicole drove, his schedule, and a prior road rage incident. Simpson also mentioned Nicole had not reported any recent threats to him and was generally security conscious. The interview concluded with plans to photograph Simpson's hand and collect a blood sample for further investigation. When the prosecutors heard the tape, Marcia Clark and friends, they knew immediately how botched this interview was. They seethed with frustration. The nickname for the police interview of the defendant on June 13th, among the prosecution, they called it the fiasco.
Van Adder, he doesn't seem like he's the brightest bulb in the bunch.
If you read the transcript, they basically feel bad that they're even interviewing him. It's bizarre. And they had him there with no attorney present. So it was like the best case situation for detectives.
Maybe do you feel like, and just in your reading, like, how much of the whole Rodney King thing was played? Did a lot of these guys feel like they were walking on eggshells and even questioning someone, well, one of his stature, but especially an African American of his stature, they were just like, we know what, like, we're gonna have to assume, unless it's so blatantly obvious, we're gonna almost play dumb and not ask the obvious questions because of everything that happened 2-3 years earlier.
It does feel like there was some hesitation with the public perception, for sure. I think that was always in the back of their mind. And when we get to the Bronco chase, I think that was also part of why that was treated the way that it was.
Okay.
I think the police also were friends with OJ and really liked him. So they feel bad accusing him of doing this. And they're letting that cloud their judgment when they're asking these questions. They know that the answers he's giving are nonsense.
Yeah. You think by him saying, no, I don't need my attorney, do you think that kind of lowered their defenses a little bit too by not having them in there? They think, oh, well, doesn't his lawyer with them? Like, we're just having a conversation here.
Right. OJ thinks he's playing psychological games with them. Like, how could I be guilty if I'm going to talk to you without my attorney? All right. So he has his interview. It's a fiasco. He gets his pictures taken, gives blood samples, and left the police station to head home.
I think OJ left that place like, nailed it. I'm envisioning him walking down the steps and like a little jump, fist in the air, freeze frame. Nailed it. Boo!
They don't suspect a thing. I totally cleared up my cut on my finger.
Oh, that was so great when you said about the cut on the finger. You nailed it, OJ. You nailed it. You're the best. You're the best, Juice. I think partly when you're a person of that stature, you do get a little sense of I can do whatever I want because you have the police in your back pocket also. You're invincible to everybody.
At this point, he might think his alibis are solid. He might be like, they think it was when I was in Chicago. So maybe he's just really leaning into, I'm going to act like an innocent person because they might not be able to pin this on me regardless of everything else.
Could also be a situation where any bumper stickers on the back of his Bronco. I support my local sheriff's department. Donate to your local sheriff's department. You know, people don't get pulled over when they have, I donate to the local police force.
Did he have that?
I don't know.
I thought you knew that.
I'm speculating here.
That is a Rob Kardashian level speculation right there. You could be a defense lawyer. Hey, man, maybe he had a bumper sticker on the back of his car. That's why they were cool with him. That's cool. He's part of the fraternal brotherhood of police. It wasn't a fiasco. He has the bumper sticker.
I don't want to get too hard in the weeds in it, but I will say him being a black man of that stature, I think that probably helped him too. We have this guy who's of a higher level. He's celebrity. He's really upstanding. So I could just see why they're not prodding him as much as they need to be.
Maybe they saw it as an opportunity for them to not come across as being overtly quick to judge the African American.
Like rehab their image a little bit through OJ.
They saw it as an opportunity because if they were right, then that would be great.
And in reality, they don't know yet. Maybe they're just really crossing their fingers that it works out that he's innocent.
So anyway.
So that night, Simpson invited over his friend who was a retired police officer, Ron Shipp. He told Ron Shipp that the LAPD detectives had asked him to take a lie detector test, and OJ declined because he had dreams of killing Nicole. Ron Shipp was shocked and said, "Man, you had dreams of killing her?" OJ responded, "Yeah, but I didn't want that. I didn't want to take it because I didn't want that needle to pop up or something like that." Shipp also noticed the cut on Simpson's hand and was suspicious because OJ changed his story about the cut 3 different times that night when he was discussing it with people. Further increasing Shipp's suspicions was when OJ asked him about DNA, specifically, how long does it take DNA to come back?
Could you imagine being this guy like, whoa, this guy's in trouble.
Yeah, this is a police officer. I'm sure he can pick up on some signs. So given all the questions OJ had that evening, Shipp said, "When I left that house, I knew he did it. There was no ifs, ands, or buts." Shipp believed Simpson invited him over so soon after the murders to pick his brain because he had once been an LAPD officer.
That's a good move by OJ. Maybe that's where you got the bumper sticker from, John.
Probable. My book.
All right. So then the next day, Robert Shapiro is hired as O.J. Simpson's attorney. Known for his celebrity representation, particularly sports figures, Shapiro was recognized for negotiating plea bargains, but had no real experience with murder trials. Throughout the day, Marcia Clark, who is now the lead prosecutor, she spent time speaking to the police, trying to gather more information about the evidence collected. She was frustrated to learn the detectives were reluctant to share information with her. In the afternoon, Clark discovered the blood samples from the crime scene had already been sent out for testing. She was concerned about their choice of lab, feeling it might not be the best option, but it was too late for her to intervene in the process. Shapiro sets up a private polygraph test, quote, for their purposes only. OJ takes the test, The guy who gave the test brings the lawyers into the room first to give the results. He scored a -22, and Shapiro said that's about as bad as you can do. The administrator said there was a chance his intense emotional level might have affected the results, but the lawyers seemed pretty skeptical it could be that bad. OJ was very upset at the results, and he said it was because he was distraught and insisted he was innocent.
I saw -6 was considered a failure.
Yeah, and he got a -22. So
does that mean he answered 22 questions wrong?
typically they ask 30 questions. So I'm guessing that mixed in are questions like, what's your name? How old are you? So I'm guessing they had 8 easy questions.
No one knew that he took this test until after the trial, right?
Not until the civil trial.
I just Googled his mugshot. I'm a little disappointed. I thought he'd look way more arrogant in his mugshot than he does. He definitely seems a little busted.
So I did a little bit of quick research on how polygraphs work. When you take a polygraph test, 4 to 6 sensors are attached to you. They measure the person's breathing rate, pulse, blood pressure, perspiration, and sometimes also things like arm and leg movement. When the test starts, the questioner asks 3 or 4 simple questions to establish the norms for the person's signals. Then the real questions being tested are asked. Throughout the questioning, all the person's signals are recorded on the moving paper. Both during and after the test, a polygraph examiner can look at the graphs and see whether the vital signs change significantly on any of the questions. In general, a significant change such as a faster heart rate, higher blood pressure, increased perspiration indicates that the person is lying. When a well-trained examiner uses a polygraph, he or she can detect lying with high accuracy. However, because the examiner's interpretation is subjective and because different people react differently to lying, a polygraph test is not perfect and can be fooled. The accuracy of a polygraph is about 87%. So it is possible for an innocent person to fail out of pure nervousness. Because of this and the fact that interpretation is subjective, they are rarely admissible in court. I thought it was interesting that they consider it 87% accurate.
You think they're a lot less accurate?
I guess in my mind, I thought they would be less accurate, yeah.
I bet there's a lot of research going behind how you act when you lie. I've never told a lie, so I wouldn't know.
I guess you need to have self-trained amnesia almost. It's like with Navy SEALs and stuff.
I think some secret agents do know how to fool them.
I think you just have to constantly tell yourself the lie until you start to believe it yourself.
Back to June 14th, late afternoon, preliminary results from the blood tests come back showing that the blood at the murder scene matched O.J. Simpson's. Marsha Clark expected an immediate arrest based on this evidence, and to her dismay, no arrest was made. Now we're June 15th, 3 days after the murders. Howard Weitzman withdrew from the case. Weitzman stated, I have decided because of my personal relationship with O.J. Simpson and many other professional commitments, I can no longer give O.J. the attention he both deserves and needs. I will continue to advise and consult with O.J. and provide whatever support I can. There was ongoing debate about whether Weitzman was fired by Shapiro and Simpson or if he withdrew because he felt the evidence against O.J. was overwhelming. And we just got breaking news. There could have been another reason.
John told us because his wife made him.
She was literally like, I'm going to move down the street. If you stay on there, you can represent OJ. 'Cause she knew how big it was going to get, how big it was probably already starting to get. I'm going to have to take the kids. You can do it. So that the interviewer who was asking her, so said, were you kind of saying you divorce him? She's like, yeah, more or less. I just didn't want that media storm and I didn't want that association. So
that's only 3 days after the murders happened. And she was already that certain that it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, all the years that he was representing him, she said he was always super ungrateful. That was another thing she'd said about OJ. Weitzman would come home and be like, he's super ungrateful. It's never good enough for him. He's always wanting more. So she was probably just like, oh, and now this, like now his wife is dead and you thinking about actually representing him? No, I'm out.
Good for her. And good for Weitzman. It was good for him to not be involved with this. So Shapiro becomes the lead attorney and he takes immediate action by offering the police a polygraph test for OJ. The police called Marsha Clark and they were like, what do you think of this offer that Shapiro is making? And she said it seemed suspicious and said them just say no or say that you don't want him to. And it was unknown to the police at this point that he had already miserably failed this polygraph test, which makes that offer even more bizarre. So then Shapiro thinks maybe he can go for an insanity defense. So he calls a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist reported that OJ talked and talked about himself. The press was out to get him. His image would never recover. It was all so unfair. There was no sadness for Nicole, his children's future. His reactions were inconsistent from what you would expect from someone wrongfully accused, but he was not insane in any legal sense, I guess.
Apparently, Shapiro was known as a fixer. He wasn't a trial lawyer. That's why it was a surprise, right?
He always tried to get plea deals.
Plea bargains and deals, and yeah.
He's thinking, yeah, we'll do a plea bargain on insanity
Yeah,
defense.
this is why I'm here.
Yeah.
And we'll go to trial and it'll be fine. And
OJ would have agreed to that?
I guess they were just exploring their options. So at this point, he's like, oh, I don't have a polygraph to plea with. I don't have an insanity defense. He's probably thinking like, oh my God, this is going to be tough.
But I got this guy, Kato Kaelin. He's going to be our star witness. I got him in the back pocket. Real straight shooter stand-up guy, Kato.
So Marcia Clark goes and visits the LAPD to get more information and documents related to the case. She receives a stack of witness statements and police reports, but she was frustrated by the slow progress. She asked the officers when they planned to file charges, and they responded, we want to interview more witnesses, so maybe early next week. At this point, Marcia's biggest concern is that OJ is going to flee the country and that he also might have meetings with witnesses and start to manipulate what their stories are and get their stories straight. It's not good to have this suspect who seems pretty clearly the person who probably most likely committed the murders being able to work with everyone, maybe pay them off and do all this stuff because he's not in jail. He's not under surveillance at all.
Quick question. Do you think the prosecutors or the defense team were wringing their hands more at, ooh, we got a juicy one here. This is going to make celebrities out of all of us.
I would say the prosecutors.
Prosecutors
And the judge, like people that are outside of a high profile celebrity case that's being telegraphed on all sides at all angles. How else would you ever know those people? The defense attorneys, this is what they're used to. They're used to representing the high powered big shots.
I'm with John there. I don't know if they're at that
Even
point
Kato.
yet, but at some point, I bet the defense was like, this is sweet for us.
Marcia reads through the reports and concludes that OJ did not have an alibi for the time of the murders. Despite this, the police still do not arrest OJ by the end of the day. Frustrated by the delay of the police arresting OJ, Marcia Clark threatened the police that she would take the case to a grand jury to expedite the process. That evening was also Nicole's viewing of her body at the funeral home. It's crazy to think all this stuff's going on and her family's also planning a funeral and dealing with the death of Nicole. Denise Brown, Nicole's sister, described the experience as a nightmare, having to bury her sister while her former brother-in-law was being investigated but not yet arrested. She recalled weeping over the need to find a turtleneck to bury Nicole in because she had been almost decapitated.
I was thinking about that. All this stuff happens, right? All this evidence, but whether you're murdered or you die of natural causes, if you're not going to be cremated, you got to be put in the ground within a week, right? So that allows the coroner's office only so much time.
I don't think it takes that long to figure that stuff out, though.
They just have to get the facts, right? Cause
Yeah.
of death, and they're just getting to be as descriptive as they can.
I read the autopsy, actually. I didn't realize that this comes up in autopsies, but they said she had partially digested food in her stomach, including rigatoni noodles, because they had gone to an Italian restaurant the night before. I guess I just didn't think how thorough all this is and how much our body just totally stops working.
I'm just thinking of the commercials. Like someone says rigatoni or pasta sauce. I hope it's our macaroni, Barilla, or whoever. Like everything's being commercialized at this point. It was like the first commercial trial. Oh, rigatoni. Ooh, what brand? Barilla.
Oh, that makes me want to go out and get some Barilla.
I don't know. It's her last meal. Maybe she had a good taste.
Probably handmade at Ron Goldman's restaurant that he worked at. Are you getting at, do you wish that it was Sal's Spaghetti House Company's pasta sauce in her belly? And then maybe
Yeah.
you'd be rich? Is that what you're getting at?
When would I sell out in this case? Probably from the beginning.
That was our sauce, just so you know.
No, I'm just curious. That was kind of stupid, but I'm just thinking everyone wanted to touch this case, but then everyone didn't want to touch it. When celebrity comes knocking, you think, oh, I'd never do that. How could anyone get to that level? And it's just like, until you're there and the cameras are in your face, you don't know.
The day after the viewing was the funeral. So it's June 16th. It's the day before the Bronco chase, just to give you a little bit of a context where we're at. So in the morning, Marcia Clark receives the test results indicating that the stains on the leather gloves had blood from both victims and a strong possibility that OJ's blood was also in the mix. She remarked, I'd never seen so much damning evidence. Despite this, the police still did not arrest OJ. And the reason was because they didn't feel there was a risk of flight because everyone knew his exact whereabouts attending Nicole Brown Simpson's funeral. OJ, clasping the hands of his young son and daughter, attended the funeral of Nicole despite the intense media scrutiny depicting him as the prime suspect. A friend remembered OJ standing over the coffin repeatedly saying, Nicole, I'm so sorry, which felt like a confession to this friend. OJ asked Nicole's sisters Dominique to walk up to the casket with him, obsessively asking about a ring he had given to Nicole and wanting to know where it was. Denise recalled OJ's lawyer, Rob Shapiro, at the funeral, asking her, can we exhume the body before Nicole was even buried? because he wanted to conduct his own autopsy and needed the family's permission to be able to do that.
Yikes. At the funeral
Yes.
asking that? What? Big deal.
Shapiro was also asking Nicole's mom about her last phone call to Nicole, trying to get details about it and what time it happened. So Nicole's family believed OJ was high on drugs at her funeral as he babbled incoherently. And yes, in Rob Kardashian's book, he confirmed that that was true. He was on a lot of drugs, I guess, to keep him pretty sedated that day.
And of drugs.
Xanax, right? All the pictures I see of him, his mouth is like dropped. He's open mouth, staring off.
I don't blame him. It takes some guts to show up at this funeral. Nicole's mom, Judy Brown, testified Simpson was so doped up, I don't even think he remembers he was at the funeral. And at one point, he seemed to be falling asleep. OJ left the funeral in the same car as Judy. A friend who was also in the car recounted Judy asking OJ, "Did you do this?" OJ
They left in the same car?
Yeah, he went back to the Browns' house after the funeral. It's this bizarre, he's guilty, but he's also Nicole's ex-husband and the father of the kids. And
innocent until proven guilty.
That's true, but imagine he has to know that her family thinks that he did it. And then he's at this funeral, and then everyone's leaving the funeral, and then OJ's just like, so can I get a ride with you guys to Nicole's house? And they're just like, sure. Kind of bizarre.
So they leave.
She asked him if he did it, and what was his answer?
He said, "I loved her too much." He just kept saying, "I loved her too much," which the friend who recounts this story said she took it as like he wasn't saying yes, but he was pretty much implying that, yes, I did do it because I loved her too much. That was the vibe of the conversation.
Like that could have been a reason why he killed her.
Right. He loved her too much, so he had to kill her. At the private burial, that same friend who had been in the car asked Al Cowlings if he thought OJ did it. And he said, "I don't know. I just don't know." Cowlings later denied saying this, but that seems like a strange thing for your best friend to say if it seems inconceivable that that's something that you would do.
I mean, you never know. No, that's a little bizarre, but at this point, he was a pretty heavy
What was his options? Was he just wouldn't show up, even though everyone, unless he was blatantly told don't show up, we'd really be in bad taste by her family. I think it's still his ex-wife, mother of his children. He's showing up as the mother of his children.
I get why he would go. It's the ride back with her family is what's a little perplexing.
Are they close family supporting him, or do they think that he murdered the person who the funeral is for? It's just very strange.
They also own that Hertz dealership too. Let's not forget
call.
about that.
Dad was like, "Just relax. I got a big deal coming in here. Getting 3 more locations by the end of the year."
OJ said if we let him come to the funeral and ride with us back to Nicole's house, I get another location. So let's be cool for a second. Could have been that. You never know.
I'm telling you, you're in the family. If you're in the family,
that was a good call by you, saying you're intertwining everything to lock her into your life even more.
With the hurts, with the juice and personality, it's all part of the persona that is gonna crumble eventually. But at this point, I would think it's who could think he really did it, even though friends would probably know because she would tell them he's going to kill me. And I think enough people definitely believed her, but he had enough of that public persona to be able to do something as ridiculous as go in the car back with her family.
Yeah.
In his mind, it probably was also like, look how innocent I am. If I was guilty, would I go to the funeral? If I was guilty, would I be in the car with the family?
Yeah, his cult of personality was going to be able to buy him that time. So they're heading back. He goes back to the Brown.
He goes back. And then after that, he creates an elaborate ruse to trick the media into thinking he was at home. But it was actually Al Cowlings who went into the house. And OJ spent the night at the San Fernando Valley home of Rob Kardashian. And during this time, while he's at the home of Rob Kardashian, Shapiro asked several doctors to attend Simpson's purported fragile mental state. They're worried that he's suicidal.
Was Kim there, do you think?
I don't think so. Because Chris was best friends with Nicole. And then they're divorced at this point. Also, after the funeral, the DA have a conversation with the police. And in fear that the police were going to continue delaying the arrest, the DA office moved forward with coordinating a grand jury to indict for murder. That brings us to the day of the Bronco chase. But before we get into that, I was wondering what you guys know about grand juries. Because I did some research on that, and I thought that was a very interesting part of our judicial branch that I really had no idea how this works.
I know they're very grand. I cracked myself up. A state jury?
Mm-hmm. This is specifically in California that I did the research for. So most felony cases would kick off with an arrest. The police write their reports. They hand them over to the district attorney's office. Then it's up to the DA to decide if charges should be filed and whether those charges will be felonies or misdemeanors. Okay. Sometimes felony charges get filed without an arrest. The police might do their investigation, pinpoint a subject, and then take their findings straight to the DA. Instead of arresting the suspect right away, the DA can file charges and get an arrest warrant. And another option the DA has is to bring the case to a grand jury. A grand jury is quite different from the juries you see in trials. Unlike trial juries that decide if someone is guilty or not based on evidence presented in court, a grand jury meets in secret to figure out if there's enough evidence to charge someone with a crime formally. This formal charge is known as an indictment. So here's how it works in California. A grand jury has 23 members and meets once a week on the same day. And they might meet for like 6 months, the same group of people. During the grand jury proceedings, it's all about the prosecutor. They present the evidence. There's no judge or defendant in the room. The person being investigated doesn't even know this is happening. The grand jury only hears one side, the prosecutors. They decide if there's enough probable cause to charge the person with a crime, and their decision does not have to be unanimous. Everything happens behind closed doors. The proceedings are not open to the public. If you get a subpoena to testify before a grand jury, you must show up and tell the truth. You cannot bring a lawyer to the room with you, but it is a good idea to talk to one before and after you testify. Also, while you're not required to keep what happens in the grand jury a secret, it's smart to discuss with your attorney whether you should talk about it or not. So that's how a grand jury works.
Once it goes to the grand jury, it's stuck in there until there's a verdict?
That's
No.
just to the point of getting them to actually say we can put forward a warrant to arrest and charge them with a crime, right?
So first you're indicted through a grand jury, and then you'll be accused of a felony.
So you'd get indicted, they would bring you back to jail, arrest you, and then you would get arraigned where you would plead guilty or not guilty.
This is all just to get to an arrest.
Instead of an arrest, you get indicted, and then they put you in handcuffs and bring you in. It's just
Real
like a little bit of a different process.
So that's what
I think the idea of it is if the prosecution isn't sure how it's going to float with the public, and it's also supposed to stop frivolous things from going through the court process. If a jury of peers are like, I don't really think this seems like you have enough, they're not going to drag everyone through the court process.
Yeah.
So it's more of a tool for the DA, but it is strange that the defense don't even know that they're having grand juries against you.
And what about the selection of the grand jury? It's not like from the public, right? Deciding.
No, my understanding was it was still from the public. You would get called to serve on a grand jury, and your commitment could either be 6 months or a year. I was wondering how they got this together so quickly. That must have been the day that the grand jury was meeting, so they could get it in front of them.
Okay.
They might see like 5 different cases presented to them, and they'll say yay or nay.
And they're just normal people, just Joe Schmoes.
Grand jury originated under the law of England and spread through colonization to other jurisdictions as part of common law. Today, the U.S. is one of only 2 jurisdictions, along with Liberia, that bastion of liberty, that continues to use the grand jury to screen criminal.
So we'll tie it back into the story.
So the DA decides that they want to move forward with the grand jury, and they are organizing it to be on the day of the Bronco chase because they're tired of waiting around for the police to decide to arrest him or not. It just kind of cuts the police out of the whole process. They were holding off on doing a grand jury because the police didn't want them to do a grand jury. They think that that's kind of saying we're going over your head. So they were trying to play nice with them, but they're like, why do we keep getting all this evidence? And it's DNA, definite concrete evidence, and you guys still are just letting him out there. And he can just flee, or he can be talking to people. This isn't okay.
I still don't feel like the grand jury would be that much faster.
Well, they would get that decision that day.
And then you get arrested right away, or indicted instead of arrested.
Yeah, so they would take him into custody then. It wouldn't be up to the police. They would have to take him into custody.
I'm reading on the history of it right now. It was used all the time in the late 18th century and colonial period. It was indispensable to the American Revolution by challenging the crown and parliament.
A little habeas corpus, maybe.
Can I just real quick shout out my sources? So I used court transcripts that I got on the internet. I also used a book called American Tragedy, The Uncensored Story of the O.J. Simpson Defense by Lawrence Schiller and James Wilworth. That has a lot of Robert Kardashian thoughts in it. I also read The Run of His Life, The People vs. O.J. Simpson by Jeffrey Toobin, and Without a Doubt by Marcia Clark. So those three perspectives were kind of mixed into this.
Did you read all of those books?
I read the parts for these days. I wanted to get all those perspectives on these days and what they all said was going on, the people that were there.
All right, well, there you have it. We're ready for the Bronco chase. Is pretty exciting, I bet.
It's a pretty wild day.
So we will end it there, and then we'll come back with another episode. Thanks to Emily M., a resident expert.
Yes, thank
Thanks
you.
for having me. Appreciate it.
It's always enlightening. And come back for part 4. We're going to get to the Bronco chase.
And we say bye-bye.